What's it like being autistic? I don't know what it's like to be anything else. I get asked that question all the time. Autism is a sensory processing difference. That's all it is. I had a normality, but my normality was wrong and everybody else's normality was right. Whenever I was allowed to kind of be myself and grow at my own pace and at my own level, that's where I excelled. All social skills training does for the children is tell them this: you're not acceptable the way you are, and you need to do what I say to be accepted by those children over there. If you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it'll live its whole life thinking it's stupid. Just because a child can't speak, it doesn't mean they can't think. Like, non-speaking doesn't mean non-thinking. Stop trying to find solutions for problems that may not even happen. If my mum was here, if she was in the seat and not me, and she'll say, what is your biggest regret in Jude's upbringing? My parents say the same thing all the time.
Series 11 of the Dig podcast. I can't believe Series 11. I didn't even know how to press record on that very first episode, but we are back for you, the listener. Real lives, real moments. That's what we need. We need real stories, things that people are going through in everyday life, brought straight to you, but with, most importantly, actionable advice. And that's what all our guests are going to bring to you in Series 11. This is real lives and real moments, so we are going to be covering sensitive topics, and I just want to give you a heads up about that. Welcome to the Dig podcast. Buckle up, get your parachute, whatever you need to stay focused. You are going to be blown away by our guest today. Jude Morrow was diagnosed as autistic when he was 11 years old. He is, and there is a list of achievements and qualifications, but he's an autistic author, he's an entrepreneur, philanthropist, and highly sought after keynote speaker. And we have him here today on the Dig podcast. Jude travels the world delivering keynote speeches, and he delivers powerful talks, and they highlight the potential of autistic individuals. And he wants to reinforce that they can lead fulfilling and successful lives. And that is what he is doing. So I can't wait for you to meet him. As a best-selling author, Jude gives invaluable insights and guidance for parents, teachers, and professionals who are nurturing a kinder mindset towards autistic individuals of all ages. It's so important. So many things we can talk about, so many issues out there, that this is just going to be a very, thought-provoking podcast. He's the visionary behind Neurodiversity Training International, which is the world's premier autistic-led training and consultancy firm. And their mission is to make a positive difference in the lives of autistic and ADHD individuals. So this is, that part of Jude's work is one which is making an impact all over the world. And I know you're going to want to find out more about it. He's a qualified social worker, and he wants people to know, especially parents, that it's all right to be autistic. And I love that bit. And that's the bit I'm going to end with, because it's him you want to hear from. Welcome to the Dig podcast, Jude.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here.
Thank you. You've came all the way from Derry this morning, so appreciate you joining us here in Belfast in the lovely Waterman House. Jude, where do I start? I suppose whenever we were doing our kind of prep for the interview, I made my first kind of error in the way that I worded my question, because I sent through to you, Jude, I hope you're okay with all of these. What is it like living with autism? And you just WhatsApped me straight back, and you were like, what did you say to me?
Well, I get asked that question all the time. What's it like being autistic? I don't know what it's like to be anything else. That's the thing, where a lot of people view autism like, say, a surfer that has an accident and loses a leg, or a motorcycle accident or something. There was a before autism and there's an after. I don't know what it's like to be anything else. I only know my own existence, where I don't see it from the other side, though. What's it like to not be autistic? It's really hard to explain. I understand the sentiment of the question, and it's a regular one, but it's one that I never really know how to answer. Or, what do you lead with? Do you lead with all the challenges, the negative stuff, the positive stuff? It's my whole existence, and I don't know what it's like to be any different. That's the thing. So what's it like? I suppose, controversially, it's great. I'm a reasonably happy person. I'm all right company. I think there's probably worse people you could be stuck in the lift with. So I suppose if that's the answer, I think it's okay. It has its ups and downs like everything else, and I'm sure everybody has those.
Yeah, and that's such a positive way to start, because sometimes when you hear the word, especially if you are a parent or a caregiver, you immediately feel the dread or the worry or the negative. But like, you are a very vibrant person that is great company and you're only just arrived. But what was life like growing up then as someone with autism? What I suppose maybe that's a better way to start. What was your childhood like in your early teens?
Well, as far as childhood, the one thing governs the autistic experience, not just my own, but anybody I've ever spoken to now. And the work that I do, I've had the joy and privilege of speaking and talking to so many autistic people, young and old. And if I was to say to another autistic person, what was your main challenge? And we can all say the same thing. Everybody fussing over us.
Okay.
Where, see, at primary school, I was that child that I was the only person with an adult sitting beside them. Where I had a classroom assistant from when I was 5, like right the way up until I was 16. And then going to things like speech therapy, OT, all of these different things. And I always thought, why is everybody fussing over me for? What's the problem? Where there's two kind of views of being autistic. There's my experience of it and then the outside looking in. So the outside looking in, a lot of people would see us as these intense, antisocial, social skill lacking, stimmy, spinny, roundy people. Whereas in our heads and in our experience of interacting with the world, it's perfectly normal. I mean, what's wrong with that? Where what happens now, and we'll get into this more, I'm sure, there's always two parents in the autism parenting journey. I find typically there's mindful mum and denial dad a lot of the time. And for me, like, yes, I had a mindful mum. I mean, love you, Emer, that's my wee mommy. And she worried. She worried about me. She's like, oh, is Jude going to live a happy and independent life? Is Jude going to do this? And obviously, everybody wanted to do everything they could to help me. And at one stage, it was like, why is everybody fussing over me? I mean, look at them in the playground. Like, they're running around and there's no direction to their games. And look at all their crayons. They're not messy and lightened up. Like, what's going on here? Where I had a normality, but my normality was wrong and everybody else's normality was right. But here was the problem. My normality was worse because there was only me and there's less of us. That's the thing, where just everybody fussing all the time, when a lot of the time I was perfectly happy.
That's so good to hear though, because you worry that the person that is having perhaps challenges that they're not happy, but you're saying they're in their own space, they're happy.
Yeah, exactly. Where a lot of the time people think of autism as a thing, as right, autism as, and everybody's like this. And it's difficult to explain because there's such a variation, or a spectrum as they call it.
Can I jump in? What is autism?
Autism is a sensory processing difference. That's all it is, right? Now, I'm not saying that autism's not a disability. It's recognized as a disability under the Equality Act, where I am somebody that I have a disability, whether I like it or not, right, under the eyes of the law. But it's a different way of interacting with the world. That's all. That's what it is. It's a difference in processing and communication. Whereas there's a normality. Like, the majority have a really dangerous power. They get to decide what's disordered in comparison to them disordered. And because I don't process information and live my life and communicate in a way that 97.5% of the world do, I'm the disordered one.
Okay. I can sense that annoys you then, that bit.
Of course it does.
Yeah,
Like,
okay.
I remember saying, and I quote it a lot, it's like, if some people have different preferences and different ways of being, I mean, what's to decide what's right and what's wrong? But the majority get to decide. Where I found how I grew and how I flourished was I was given space to be myself. And I suppose there was less stigma and less social media and less fear mongering back then. But whenever I was allowed to kind of be myself and grow at my own pace and at my own level, that's where I excelled. We're now in the kind of the digital age of information and everything being out there. There's a lot of, negative stereotypes being reinforced. There's a lot of, cottage industries that are popping up, and, a lot of scams, and stuff like that. So it's almost as if, as time has gone on, the journey for parents has got harder, which is what makes it difficult for me. Because, I mean, whenever I started being kind of public and open about talking about autism stuff, a lot of the challenges my parents faced 25 years ago, parents were still experiencing it now. And that's where it was like, God, this is really, really strange.
Thank you so much again for listening to the Dig podcast. And don't forget, If you like listening each week, if you love our guests, please hit that follow button if you're listening on Apple or Spotify. If you're watching on YouTube, hit subscribe. And that means even more people can find out about the Dig podcast, and we can keep reaching out to the guests each week and bringing you some inspirational stories with actionable advice. Now we're going straight back to our amazing guest. And what advice would you say to parents then? I know I'm kind of skipping forward, but it's just because you've just touched on it there. It is so hard because they're being bombarded with all, the online content. They're so worried. It's heightened because of that. What would your advice be if someone's going through the thick of, perhaps getting a diagnosis with a child or struggling with the challenges that they're having? What would be the first kind of piece of advice that you would give to them?
Are you ready for the hard hitting bits?
Yes, well, I hope everybody is. Listen, I know this is a hard topic.
It
I
is,
know
of course it is.
people that are going through all of this, and I know this will be very hard for some people to listen to, but it'll be actionable and helpful, hopefully. What would you say?
So what I find everywhere, and whether it's parents looking for help for their children or adults perhaps who've been undiagnosed or unsupported their whole lives, is the cavalry's not coming. That's what I'm saying now. I have been somebody that I have been up in Stormont. I have spoken to Westminster politicians, Leinster House. I've been everywhere campaigning and lobbying for better provision, better support, and more resources for autistic and ADHD children and adults. There is a magic money tree, as we saw during COVID, for street signage and everything else. There's a magic money tree for whatever our elected representatives want there to be a magic money tree for. Sadly, with us and our cause and our mission and our community, that magic money tree is just never shaken. So at this minute in time, as of the recording of this show, the waiting list for a diagnostic of autism or ADHD for a child is 6 or 7 years. That's the waiting list. That's how long you're going to be waiting. For adults, it's indefinitely. So a lot of people think it'll get better tomorrow, it'll get better next month. Act now, act today, because time goes by quickly. We were talking just before this recording. I was saying with Ethan, my son, he's 11 now. That went done very, very quickly. And I didn't want him to be in waiting list. I had to go private for him. And the first advice I would have for anybody is go private for everything.
Okay.
Get that support.
So that's going to hit different people in different ways here, because there will be the response that people can't afford to go private.
Yeah.
And I'm very aware that that's probably what many people will be thinking when they're listening to this. So what would your answer be to that?
My answer to that is whenever I had to go through a private diagnostic for my son, at that time I had already pretty much been bankrupted by that stage, building the NTI brand. I was unemployed for a while. I had extremely poor credit, and what I had to do was I had to make sacrifices, and it was really, really hard. Do you know what I had to do? I had to go skydiving less. I had to stop smoking. I had to have less pints, and I had to make those lifestyle choices to make it affordable for myself. And over time, it was hard, and I had to do it because at that time, my son had a school placement breakdown. And at that time, I was just leaving social work, and NTI was on the journey to becoming what it is now. At that point, we hadn't had any investment yet. We hadn't won any awards. We hadn't done anything like that. So I had to step back and do it all myself. And what I wanted to do after that, since Ethan got a diagnostic, help and support at school, a new placement, that's when we collectively, NTI as a group, we thought we need to make this accessible, affordable to everybody, and regardless of socioeconomic status. So we wanted to design a whole wraparound system that would be affordable and accessible to even a single mother with 3 children with no family support on universal credit. And that's exactly what we've achieved now.
Okay, so we're going to talk about that later on. So NTI is Neurodiversity Training International, which is the organisation which Jude so passionately has created for people who perhaps can't afford to pay for the private. It is private, but I mean, they can't afford to go down the route that they traditionally would have.
Yeah.
So we are going to talk about that. But before we get there, I want to talk about the struggles that people are going through. So whenever you were going through your teenage years, so you were diagnosed when you were 11. Did I read that you weren't told you were 18? Or
I wasn't told until later on because in 2001, but before going into big school as it was then, that's whenever I was diagnosed, because whenever my mum sensed that I wasn't quite like other children, like one thing I always start with, like, and I do like a lot of like live shows and stuff like that, and I always open with this line, and it was, the first kind of indication to my parents that I was different was I used to line up my toy cars on the windowsill of my parents' house, and I always see these wee nods from a lot of the mammies in the audience, the wee nods, right, as in my child does that as well. And I've learned over the years where it's like, I'm not really good at like picking up facial expressions or other people's body language, but I know what that means, as in, yes, my one does that as well. And after that, the fussing started, uh, and it continued right the way up through secondary school, where I was always wondering, and all these professionals coming in to see me and all of that, where a lot of the stereotypes when it comes to autism are true, right? A lot of them where I didn't have a big circle of friends. I didn't really like mixing with people, and then I kind of fluctuated between being a bit of a recluse and then the class clown or the village idiot at the same time, where you kind of have to adapt. There's a lot of social nuances as teenagers, because in a teenager's head, in any teenager's head, the social currency is popularity and friendships. It's not necessarily academic ability, and I didn't fit in very easily. I was always kind of very awkward, and there just wasn't really the awareness back then, because I was like among the first wave of autistic or ADHD children to go through the mainstream school system. If I was born in 1980 instead of 1990, I would have probably been at a special needs school or just kept at home entirely. And at school, there was a lot of trying to make me fit in with everybody, because there's an expected mold of how a child should be and how a child should develop. And then anybody like me that sticks out outside of that, there's always that wee push in the back to fit in. And that's what it always was, where you see a lot of things, and a lot of parents even now being railroaded into things like social skills training, right? And all social skills training does for the children is tell them this: you're not acceptable the way you are, and you need to do what I say to be accepted by those children over there. And don't get me wrong, I'm not at doctoral level when it comes to psychology, but it's not brilliant for the old self-esteem, is it? Whenever children are being forced to be an unnatural way. And now, whenever people say that, people think, oh God, so autistic kids, they need to be taught to fit in. They need to be taught to conform and be like everybody else. But remember gay conversion therapy? Remember that? People would, that's abhorrent now. It's banned everywhere. And basically what that was is trying to convince somebody, persuade somebody, or force somebody to live and be in a unnatural way. And people view that as abhorrent to the LGBTQIA plus community, but it's all right because it's us, because we don't fit in. And that's the thing, where a lot of parents have these expectations. If we don't do all this, then our child won't grow up to be a happy and independent, well-rounded individual.
wow, okay.
Hard hitting.
No, but it's, I don't have any challenges like this in the home, so I'm learning when you're telling me this. I'm not a teacher. I'm not in those settings, so I never really thought about it like that there before. And there'd be people listening as well, but people who this would give great comfort to people who are going through this, to think that they don't have to force their child to be something they can't be, really, basically, at all. So whenever you were 18, then what happened?
My parents told me whenever I was 18, so I was a bit funny. Like I joined, like there was no autism groups as such whenever I was growing up. Like, and a lot of like the touring stuff that I did, like the oldest autism group I ever met, North and South, was 2009. So I was 19 by then. But my parents didn't tell me because they thought, it was a label, and they didn't want the negative connotation that I may not have dealt with it very well. And back then I probably wouldn't have. But I didn't really know how to process it. It was like, what is this? And then what I did, it was back in the day, I looked up on my phone, because I'm of that generation, among the first to have the internet in their pocket. And then I looked at the phone, and it was like, whoa, lacks social skills, lacks communication skills, will have lifelong developmental challenges. And I was like, we'll see, even at that time. And whenever I was going to university, though, whenever I decided, I know the guy that lacked social skills all the way through school decided to become a social worker. You couldn't make that up.
No, but
Uh,
that's how encouraging though.
you
Amazing.
could make that up, and I needed a lot of help and support and all that. But in front of a camera and with a microphone and stuff like that, I can always be my best self. You know, everything's lovely, everything's brilliant, but I do need help to do the very basic things that a lot of people take for granted,
Yes.
like organizing myself, tying my shoes. You know, I can't read digital clocks. I have to have analog everything, right? I know that's very antiquated, but at the end of the day, if all my challenges were just highlighted throughout my whole life, I wouldn't have achieved what I have. Where the best thing I can say to anybody, whether they're an educator or a parent, focus on what they're good at. It's like that quote that's incorrectly attributed to Einstein: if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it'll live its whole life thinking it's stupid. So whenever that stopped for me, you know, I obviously improved, but I'm not going to say that I'm like a victim. Like, I was my own worst enemy as well a lot of the time. You know, I'm not immune to, you know, making mistakes and stuff like that and doing things I regret. Like, it's very easy to have a narrative and whip up support in social media. It's everybody's fault. It was the EA's fault. It was the teacher's fault. It was my parents' fault. It was everybody's fault but mine. Where I had to take responsibility in early adulthood and, I suppose, make the conscious effort to kind of get my own kind of thoughts and mental health and perception in check as well. So there's a lot there. I maybe answered your question.
Yes, you did answer a question, but like you're trying to say there, what I'm trying to think is the listener. So what did you, and this isn't even on the list of questions, but I'm just intrigued to know what you said you had to kind of become self-aware and get systems in place to help you. What did you do yourself then, as someone who, you know, was finding these challenges and it wasn't everybody's fault, it was kind of things going on with you. So how did you treat yourself in some respects? Did you get the outside help to do that? Did you put things in place? What did you do?
In some ways I did, yeah. In some ways I did, where I had like counselling and CBT and stuff like that, because I bought into the negative autism narrative. I bought into it myself a lot of the time, where I thought that my life was just like all these hurdles and challenges and so on and so forth. And I had to kind of reframe my thinking to being, instead of my life being like one barrier after another, it was more like one victory after another. And how those victories came is when everybody backed off and let me be me for who I was. You know, look, you know, maybe Jude's not great at that, but he's good at this. Just let him do that. You know, it's like what my mum stopped doing was letting her worry kind of cascade down onto me, because, like it or not, anxious parents will have anxious children. You know, worryful parents will have worryful children. I don't even know if worryful's a word.
Is worryful a word? Just what I'm like, but it's a great word.
We'll use it
let's
for
say
now.
it is. Okay.
Right? We've coined it, and hopefully, if there's date stamps in this, we're going to trademark this. Right?
Worryful.
Worryful. So
I understand what it means, though. You know what I mean? That is so true.
And do you know what happens? Whenever you say, and we actually did this, and this is really fun, is that whenever you put like a parent on a heart monitor or whatever else, or even like electrical activity in the brain, if you say the word autism, say it out loud, the heart rate and the electrical activity in the brain will change. And what that is that's an actual physiologically negative response to the word autism. And what do people do when they worry? We need to do everything. This is the kind of thought pattern that I'm really trying hard to change, is whenever the word autism comes into the conversation, it's automatic worry and automatic action. And a lot of parents think, if I do nothing, the situation will get worse. But here's what the thing is. Sometimes the nothing is better than the somethings.
Yeah.
Where, see, whenever people say, Jude, I've enrolled my child at a multi-thousand-pound social skills course, do you think I made the right decision? I'll say no. Because what you're going to do is train your child to, I suppose, emulate everybody around them and hide their true authentic self for the sake of fitting in. And even like one of the main things, and it's my emails every day or the website contacts every day, my child is starting nursery, I need to get all this help and support done for them. You know, basically, can you help us? Where, why not just try them first? Are you ruling out in your mind that your child might not do really, really well and thrive and be happy and make friends like everybody else? Because what happens a lot, this is a common mistake, is the kids start school with all these professionals. I mean, an entourage. an entourage of literal, like that Beyonce would be jealous of. They have OTs, speech and language, social skills people, classroom assistants, and this army of people. And what they're doing is that instead of trying to accelerate their child's progress, they're holding them back further. It's really, really interesting. Where a lot of the time, if we're working with families, and the most progress we see is whenever a lot of the professional involvement is scaled back, where it has to go at the level of the child. And whenever things went at my level, I did well. And whenever I felt I was being pushed too hard, I just withdrew. And that was not just from childhood. That's up to right now, more or
Yeah.
less.
And whenever, like, I know I've heard a lot of like family and friends and all talk about early intervention is key, getting in early with as much as you can to help.
Intervention against what?
I know. You're making me so aware of the language now.
Yep.
I used to be an occupational therapist, so I'm very aware of the language and all that intervention early that we would all have been trained to do. But from someone that's lived that life
Yeah.
and has the experience now of working with other children, perhaps you shouldn't worry as much about that. Is that what your message would be in the early stages if it's not?
Yes.
So, and it's not, everybody's situation is different, I'm sure you would say.
Of
Like, I
course.
mean, there will be people listening who that's worked for and all of that, and we're very aware. But on the whole, there can be a lot of positives from letting things kind of progress naturally.
100%. Where it doesn't matter whether a child is autistic or ADHD. Of course, learning difficulties and learning disabilities is going to be a different matter. I'm not naive either. I know there are a lot of people out there who will not live a happy, independent life like me. I know that. I'm aware of that for various different factors. But in a lot of cases, if children need to grow up to be happy, well-rounded and independent adults, and they need to learn at their own pace. Like, I was allowed to make mistakes. I was allowed to say the wrong thing. I was allowed to put my foot in the dung pile, where I wasn't sheltered, where I think a lot of parents can just go straight to the bubble wrap suit, right? Shelter, hide, everything else. Where I always say, but look, let them mix, let them try, let them go for it. Whatever it may be, whatever their interest is, whatever else. Like, I'm sure you can imagine my mother's face whenever I said I wanted to take up skydiving. Where the thing was, because she was afraid of heights and doesn't like action sports or adrenaline or anything else, because, it doesn't mean that I don't. Where that happens a lot, where a lot of like parents would think, oh, my child has sensory difficulties, they can't do that. Let them try it.
Okay.
Let them try it. What's the worst that can happen? They tell you, right, I don't want to be here anymore. I don't like this. Where it's just give space, because with early intervention, as you said, number one, it's intervention against what? Because this is the real nugget of the parenting autism experience. It's trying to find solutions today for tomorrow's problems that might not even happen anyway.
Yes.
And that's what happens.
Yeah. There'd be a lot of people thinking about this now, and this is a hard conversation, isn't it? Like, it is hard. It's bound to be hard for a parent listening, a
course it
caregiver
is.
listening, to hear things, and everybody's situation is different. We accept that, but this is maybe a different outlook on things from people who have been very closed book about what they will let their child maybe experience or be part of because they're afraid. But as you're saying, afraid of what?
Afraid of what? Like, if my mum was here, if she was in the seat and not me, and she'll say, what is your biggest regret in Jude's upbringing? My parents say the same thing all the time. We worried too much about him. We worried far too much unnecessarily, where maybe we didn't enjoy Jude being a young child as much as we could have. Where a lot of the problems that they thought, because they were always told, Jude'll never live an independent life, Jude'll never talk, Jude'll never do this, Jude'll never do that. And whenever they decided, right, we're just going to let him go under his own steam as much as possible, obviously we'll stop him putting his life in danger or anything else. But whenever they peeled back and stopped worrying, they started enjoying me more. And that was more in my teens, and it's understandable given the fact that services here at the minute are so paralysed, are not fit for purpose, where a lot of parents are abandoned. So they're trying to do it themselves.
Yeah.
And they're trying to be prepared for a million different scenarios that might not happen. And that's how this emotional paralysis comes, where the main thing that people say to me is, Jude, I don't even know where to start. And it's like, right, let's start here. Let's, go forward, map it out. Where and I'll keep saying it, in a lot of cases, sometimes the nothing is way better than the something. The something can be not necessarily harmful, but it can be counterproductive.
Yeah, so good. It's a different way to look at it, and one that's going to open up people's minds, open up mine. What are the early signs of autism? So there will be people listening who perhaps haven't had a diagnosis yet, maybe haven't even talked about it with family or friends yet, because that's a part of the process too. But what are the early signs, would you say, of a child having autism?
So the number one early sign is, does it run in the family? Right. So with mum and dad, right, are either of them autistic or ADHD? Was there a purple-haired quirky granny knocking about? You know, that's what it's going to be. It's going to run in the family. I mean, if we want to get into the vaccine debate, we absolutely can.
Will
But
not, will not.
well, no, well, because I'd win.
I know.
Because there is no life.
It's
But
such, look, you know what? It's all these things that are talked about and throughout out there, and look, we're all allowed to have our opinions and views and all. But I suppose that is like one of the things I would hear amongst mums, like, you know, oh, he's not doing this, and I'm worried that he has this. But what would you say the early signs are?
well, the early signs typically would be things like not responding to name, not talking and walking on as per the developmental milestones.
Yeah.
Like I didn't walk until I was nearly 3. And like I had speech therapy up to I was about 7. Now nobody can get me to sit down or shut up.
I know, it works.
So those would be the typical things, or you know, things like lining things up, a keen sense of order, you know, I suppose a negative, you know, reaction to any sort of sudden change and things like that, and you know, having a bit of a crutch or a dependence on routine. Like, yes, whilst those things are true and to varying degrees, but you know, people can't view autism the same way as what are the signs of the common cold, feeling a wee bit rotten, having a wee bit of a cough, and so on and so forth, because we all are so different.
Yeah.
And develop and grow and mature at different stages, and then you have environmental factors and stuff like that as well.
Just taking a short break, guys, from our guest. We're going to be back really soon, but I want to let you know about our fabulous partner that we're partnering with for 10 full weeks, MCG Property Group. Are you thinking about renovating your home but you're not sure where to start? Then our podcast sponsor, MCG Property Group, have given you a simple tip. Why not begin by writing down your top priorities? What changes would make the biggest difference in your home? Take just 10 minutes to do this, and I can help turn your ideas into a plan. And when you're ready to bring that plan to life, MCG Property Group is the team to trust. They're a family-run, female-led business with over 15 years experience. MCG takes the stress out of renovations, handling everything from budgets and builders to timelines and building control. Their expertise means your project runs smoothly, on time and on budget, so you can enjoy the transformation without the hassle. We do not need any more stress in our lives. If you're still in just the idea stage, then check out MCG's website. It's linked in the show notes for expert advice to help you take the next step. Your dream home could be closer than you think. Thank you for listening, guys. Now we're going straight back to our amazing guest. So true. And then, like, a big thing that people would say is they're so worried their child's never going to talk. And you did mention there, was your parents told that?
Not explicitly, where I did have speech therapy and I had some words, and how they kind of knew early on was I knew all the makes and models of cars. I was always like a car enthusiast, and sort of still am, where I knew all of those, where I had like an encyclopedic knowledge of cars and things like that, things that other people would think is irrelevant. But it's interesting you talk about speaking. Do you know what I find really interesting? And we've observed this every single year since we've been going. When do a lot of kids like talk, or and when do I get a lot of emails saying, oh, my child started speaking or whatever else? It's near the end of the summer holidays. And it's like, so here, you know, for the global audience, right, we get 8 weeks off in the summer. I know,
What?
right? 8 weeks off for the summer.
What, that's like too much, too little?
It's
what are you saying?
far too much.
Far too long? Oh, right, okay.
It's far too long.
All the teachers that are listening are like, no, it's not.
It's far too long, right?
Okay.
And and it made me think,
Too long because I'm interested to know
why is this?
why is it too long?
Why is the summer holidays too long?
Yeah.
Because they get upset and bored by week 4.
Oh, you're so right.
And I don't know. It's just I just think it's far too long to break the routine and stuff like that. But
Okay. Sorry,
like,
keep going there.
but it's always just before the summer holidays ends. And why is that? Because the pressure's off. Because if you think of a child speaking, I would always say to parents, never say to a child, use your words. Because what are you doing? Stage fright, performance anxiety, which could set back a lot more. Where even still, like sometimes parents say, will my child ever talk? I don't know. I don't know. I don't have a gift. There's no scientific evidence whatsoever that anybody can tell the future or predict it or how a child will develop. But 80% of our communication is non-spoken anyway. So there are many independent autistic people who are non-speaking and have careers that don't involve them needing communication even these days. Like, how do we arrange this podcast?
I know, all without even seeing
All
each other
or
speak.
saying a
Yeah.
word. So, and I know there's a lot of, parents want their children to talk to them and stuff like that there, but it may not be a foregone conclusion that they'll be able to speak, but it's just taking the pressure off, reducing the anxiety of it. It's a really, really common worry, but just because a child can't speak, it doesn't mean they can't think. Like, non-speaking doesn't mean non-thinking
I know.
either, because that's another thing that a lot of people think is because somebody can't speak, their intellect must be lower. But then the biases that exist whenever autism comes into the conversation, right? Funny story, that's sort of a side note, right? So I did like a gig, it was a conference and it was in New York. And this is the way I'm spoken to, right? So there's 4 speakers and the event coordinator came and met us all. And so, right, there's 4 speakers, right? So this is how we were all greeted. So, hi Rob, hi Jen, hi Steve, hi Jude. So there's like almost like an infantile kind of thing towards me because obviously I'm Jude Morrow, the autism person and stuff like that. And then obviously me with my social skills being top notch, I said to the event coordinator, I was like, hi Sonia, back to her. And it really annoyed her.
Yeah.
And I was like, but you did it to me. Where there's almost like an instant infantilization whenever it comes to like autism stuff. And I suppose with the speaking stuff to kind of tie into the point where a lot of people, whenever they think of autism, they automatically think, or non-speaking, that it's either low intellect or intelligence. And it's not always the case, where I've met tons of non-speaking autistic people who live very happy, very independent lives through the use of spelling boards or AAC devices.
Amazing. This is good stuff. This is positive encouragement for people. Obviously, everyone hopes their child will talk, but a happy, independent life without words can exist as well, which is so good to hear.
Of course.
And I suppose is it Susan spoke to you like that?
Sonia.
Sonia. In
Sorry,
Sonia's,
Sonia.
in Sonia's defense, I suppose it's up to us as people on the other side of things to learn how to communicate with people that perhaps have extra challenges. I'm trying to make sure that I'm saying it right as well.
But you don't have to, right? Do you know
Do
what,
not,
right?
But I don't want you to go out and say,
Do you know what
Caroline said.
Do you know what this is? This is my big, thick reptilian
know.
skin. See, when I was a social worker, like I was like spat on, had like knives pointed at me and all. You won't offend me. Don't worry. Like,
I know, but I think people are worried of not using the right language, aren't they? Because people are afraid of upsetting or hurting or insulting someone. But I guess on the other side of things, we don't know either. So we're trying to learn ways to speak to people and engage with people and make sure we're doing the right thing. This is so important.
Like people can, like, and I do find that though, that there's a lot of tiptoery,
Yes.
especially around me. Everybody's so afraid to say the wrong thing. I always say, you can ask me, you can say whatever you want, except for what we OHMRC. But other than that, you can ask me whatever you want. Where
You're that type of person though. There is
aye.
people who might not take so kindly, so we have to learn ways that we don't upset people, I suppose. Or hold our hands up and say, I'm sorry, I didn't know that was the wrong thing to say.
But see, people who are truly dedicated to the mission and truly dedicated to helping people in education and stuff like that don't take offense to it.
Yes.
And all the people that are on comments saying, you're using the wrong language, you're doing this, you've offended me, I'm upset, I'm phoning Stephen Nolan later on. My advice to them would be, get off social media. Just stay off it. Take a break. Okay? If you're really upset and really antagonized and terminally offended by everything on social media, just come off it. Take a break. Book a holiday. Seville in the south of Spain's lovely.
Okay.
You know, and that's the way I say it. Where
Well, look, yes, there's a story all around that as well. And I suppose all learning, and we have to have conversations like this to open it up. And I'm glad you're saying all of this. Makes me feel freer to have the conversation with you. You said straight back to me on WhatsApp, actually, I'm not, autism isn't, I don't live with autism. I am autistic. And I thought, right, you've taught me that, and I'm glad.
I don't live with autism. I live with people's perception
Of
of
autism,
Like,
I know.
like were you sitting this morning? Oh God, I better not offend this man or say the wrong thing.
I could tell you were dead on, like you weren't going to eat me if I said something wrong, but I am aware that we'll all meet people in our lives where we might say the wrong thing. And I suppose just being aware that we don't really know the language either. Conversations like this will help that.
But is it important?
Well,
I know a lot of
Parents
people
are
will
very
say,
highly sensitive as well, and can get upset. And I understand that this is their life, their kids are their lives. And I know that, but you're the right person. You lived it and you now work with parents.
yeah,
What can we talk about that word meltdown? Is that the right? I'm afraid to even say that, but
meltdown's fine.
meltdowns. What is a meltdown? Because I know people experience that a lot now in their family lives. And how can, I suppose, we as people who are looking on, but also family members, help support a child through that?
Right.
Or what?
Okay.
You're
so
laughing at me, but am I saying the right thing?
as far as meltdowns, right? There's a very clear difference between meltdowns and tantrums. So this is where I get all the boos online, right? So there are 5 meltdown triggers, and if it's any of these, it's a meltdown, right? So it's sensory overload. So somewhere's too noisy or too bright. Sensory underload, right? Because I'm one of these people where I experience sensory underload, and the only way I can sort of bring myself back up again is by throwing myself out of a little airplane, right? So I have high sensory needs. Do you know those kids that lack a sense of danger?
Yes.
That's me. I don't know what fear is or boredom, right? So sensory underload's the second one. The third one is physical pain, discomfort. So I'm somebody, I don't like labels and stuff like that, or things can be uncomfortable and I'm either too hot or too cold. Like I am literally a nightmare to regulate my own body heat or sudden change in routine, right? That's it. If it's any of those 5 things, it's a meltdown. And the word no is not a meltdown trigger. So this is what I get all the time. Jude, if I take my child's screen off them, they have a meltdown. I say, no, they don't. They have a tantrum.
Okay.
So there's a big difference between a meltdown and a tantrum.
But is that, just jumping in because I'm curious to know, if you take the screen off them, is that not a taking away the sensory thing? So then it is a meltdown? No.
No, not necessarily.
Okay.
So what a meltdown is a meltdown is something that accrues over a period of time.
Okay.
Over a period of time where you can see the one incident there. Now, people can view meltdowns sort of in the same kind of thought pattern as an epileptic seizure. Like it's a random, uncontrollable event. But a lot of the time it is, where if there is a meltdown, it's looking at the day leading up to it, with the 24 hours leading up to it, where it's a meltdown. It's a meltdown's this,
Okay.
it's not this.
Right.
Where, so
when you say no, I can see now the distinction there.
Yep.
So does that lead to a situation where a child associates? I'm trying to think of like people thinking, oh, they've had a meltdown just because you told them they couldn't have something. That's not a meltdown.
No, that's not a meltdown. No.
Okay.
That's where all children have tantrums. And it doesn't matter whether they're autistic, they're ADHD, and whatever else. Where a lot of people think that meltdowns are a random, uncontrollable event, and that autistic children, it's their autism that makes them lash out or scream or whatever else. It's not the case. So if a child has an outcome in mind, that's a tantrum. As in, if I scream the house down, I will get ice cream, or I will get my ice cream for longer, or I don't have to go to bed, or whatever else. Where a meltdown is something that is just completely uncontrollable, and it's a combination of things over a period of time, and then it leads to that point.
What can people do to help a child that has a meltdown?
Reassure them that they're not in trouble.
Okay.
Don't tell them to stop or whatever else, because even now, one thing I can't really do is airports. I can't see queues and noise and stuff like that, where it's like just reassurance is going to be the big thing, where it's really, really hard to describe. But in every kind of conscious meltdown I've ever had as an adult, there has been a build-up over time. Okay. So let's say, for example, like in an alternate universe to this podcast. As I was saying beforehand, don't know if I said it in the recording, but this morning my car didn't start.
Yeah.
Right? So my car didn't start, and then I say I came up here and there was no parking spaces or anything else. The whole schedule's gone, the phone's ringing, it's just everything in my head to the point where I'm frozen. I have to stop. Where it's like, no, that as a meltdown where it's like, right, I am now overloaded with all this and the whole day has changed and everything else. But it's always difficult to relay that to parents because there's a big difference between a meltdown and a tantrum.
Yeah.
So an example of a tantrum that I would regularly have is, let's say I go to the skydiving club and I've my gear all on, the helmet on, I'm ready to go. And then they say, no, we've clouded over. It's like, no, that's a tantrum.
Yes.
And I'm a petulant child driving back home again.
Yes.
So that's the difference.
Good example, and good for people to see the difference, and then they can adapt how they react. So you're saying give them space, let them, and reassure them they're not in trouble.
Yeah, there's always triggers to meltdowns, and it's those 5 things that I outlined: sensory overload, sensory underload, physical pain, discomfort, or sudden change. So anytime a parent would say to me, my child has meltdowns randomly, no, it's not. It's not like an epileptic seizure. Right. It will be one of those 5 things. Maybe in the comments below, if there's one I've missed.
Okay, yes.
Engagement.
Yeah.
But that's typically what you're going to look at.
Yes, I understand that. And it's good to know that too. And for parents, I'm sure lots of people have a training and advice on this, but there's maybe people out there in the dark and don't know how to deal with this.
100%. And I don't take that for granted. Like I said one time, and it was, sure, everybody knows what autism is. Sure, everybody knows, but we're not at the awareness stage. We need to go on. But Caroline, I do have parents that come through our care and they know nothing. They are at minute 1 of hour 1 of day 1.
Yes.
And they know nothing. And then what happens is they go down social media rabbit holes or Googling everything. And even though awareness is a good thing, it's almost as if people can be nearly too aware because they just take in too much and then head explosion, where it's like, what do I do? And that's kind of the emotional paralyzed state that we find a lot of parents in, where it's like, I've consumed so much, I don't know what to do. I just need a direction and sifting through all this stuff that I know of what's true and what's not.
So hard. It's so hard for people. And it's such an emotional thing. And I suppose managing other people's perception of it as well, and extended family members, like your parents, and you're training yourself and you're doing it, but then that's not taken into consideration aunties and grannies and grandads and all what they're saying about it too. So the parents have so much, the caregivers have so much to deal with, haven't they?
100%.
Like, even more so than the child, probably.
Yes.
Because the child's happy, as you say.
Because they don't know any different.
I know.
It's their life, it's their reality, and they don't know any different. But yeah, that is always the challenge, is kind of navigating the wider family circle.
Yes.
Is going to be the big thing, because you will have different people with different opinions, and even generational differences as well. Yeah. That's a really common theme that we get.
Yeah, and that's a whole other conversation. We're gonna have to get you back, because part 2 is right. But before, and I still want to talk about a few more things. How do couples? So if you're a couple and you're raising a child, how do couples, and have you any advice on this, stay strong as a couple through this? Because this can tear people apart and couples apart as well, because both are navigating it differently. Any advice on how couples can stay united when trying to look after a child with extra difficulties or challenges?
Again, this is again one of the most common scenarios when we're doing kind of family support work with anybody. There's 2 parents, typically mindful mum and denial dad, or it can be switched around in a lot of cases as well. But there needs to be a united front for the sake of the child, because, and let's pretend like you're in denial. There's nothing wrong with them. And it's like, how do you know? Where even if there's a 1,000,000 to 1% chance that, they're autistic or whatever, or ADHD, and might need support later on, would you not rather go through that assessment process and actually find out? Because who knows, you'll be right. I sort of try and make things as lighthearted as I can whenever, right? Sometimes I say to the dads, right, you know what, right? See, if we go through the process and you turn out, yep, there's nothing wrong with them, you were absolutely right. I will treat you to a full evening of pints, darts, pool, and pizza. How about that for an offer, right? And I will say publicly, you know what? You were absolutely right.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's
Okay.
a great scenario then.
Fair enough. You were right.
Yeah.
Right. So so going through this and getting help and support, it's a situation where everybody wins.
What about with each other? Is there a thing they need to keep talking to each other? Like, I mean, I'm just trying to think of keeping couples strong together rather than them.
Don't keep arguing. Right. Don't keep arguing. If you are mindful mom and you're trying to get through to denial dad, stop. Right. Because it doesn't matter whether you live with them, you're married to them, you work with them, or anything else. You can't reason with people who are unreasonable and who are unreasonable about it. So if you keep pushing and keep talking and keep everything, it's just going to create more and more and more conflict where the parent in denial will come round eventually.
Yes.
Do not force it. Where if it's a case of the unstoppable force versus the immovable object, don't. Where if you're thinking, I need to educate the other person, don't. Don't even try. Because this is not just between like couples. A lot of the time, more commonly, it's between mum and granny or dad and granddad, where it's like, oh no, they're just easily distracted, or oh no, they're just very interested in things. Where I would say, look, do not be buying your mum or your dad or your husband or your granny or your wife all of these books and showing all these academic papers. They have a fixed belief, right? And they will come round eventually.
Okay.
Don't force it. Because remember what I was saying about trying to push the child too much,
Yes.
right?
Same thing.
It's exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
Where often, like if I try and push you and I'm being very persuasive about something, push and push and push, it can often repel people.
Yes.
So the convincing and persuasion may have the opposite effect.
I suppose there's going to be loads of things there, because if one person is perhaps trying to embrace a certain way of being with a child, but the other person is not undertaking those thoughts, that could cause conflict as well. So it's going to be a tricky time, I'm sure, to navigate for couples and families and all when this is going on.
It can be,
Yeah.
but what you can do is you can just go along with it. Like if a child is struggling, right? Because this is again one way I try even to accelerate that penny drop moment, where and that's the main source of conflict, is the disagreement about the child's needs. That's the main disagreement. It will always be the main disagreement. And I still get it every day, even this morning on the phone on the way up. But Jude, I don't see what's wrong with them. And I said, okay, so in your child's care right now, I have seen them, a psychologist has seen them, a psychiatrist has seen them, an OT has seen them, a speech and language therapist has seen them, a private counsellor has seen them, they've had 2 hospital inpatient admissions, and we're all wrong. We're all wrong. We've all got this wrong, and you're right. It's like, do you know what I mean? Where it's helping people to gain a sense of perspective, because nobody can view their own child's needs objectively, right? If me and you were having like a competition of who is the most beautiful baby, we'd be arguing all day, because I would say, no, my Ethan's a beautiful baby, and you'd say, no, but my babies are more beautiful. And parents can be, and that's the thing. It's like the old expression that's backed in Freudian psychology of blinded by love.
Yeah.
And that's what happens. And that blindness can cause 2 things. Over anxiousness, over worryfulness, that's a couple of new words today, or complete denial. There's very seldom a middle ground.
Yeah, I know. And it's good to know that those exist, and that if people are falling into those categories, it's probably normal enough, but you can find ways through with different things that are out there. God, I could talk to you all day, and I'm even lost. I'll throw these cards away. I don't even know where I'm at anymore. But so you're training, so I want to get the right name of your organization.
It is a mouthful, isn't it?
Neurodiversity Training International. All over the world, you have trained professionals with degree status and more, helping families navigate this.
Do you know what's see the journey of NTI as a whole? It was a hobby project that's just got wildly out of hand. So do you know what I decided to do? I nearly didn't mention it, was how I came onto this scene in the first place. Was I decided to write a book about my experiences, because I thought, right, a lot of books out there are centered on parents' experiences of their autistic children. But what about when we grow up and we have beards and jobs and cars and stuff? Like, how about I write about that? And it just really, really took off. like just whoosh.
That
And
book's called.
it's called Why Does Daddy Always Look So Sad? Because my son did say that, because as I'm sure you might have gathered, see my "you've made your first million" face and "you've got a few weeks to live" face are exactly the same. I'm not very animated. I can't fake laugh or fake cry or anything like that. I'm just very,
Okay.
like this. But and he thought like I looked sad all the time, but it's just my face.
Okay.
Do you know
That's
what I
the
mean?
title of your book. Very
That was the first one, and I've actually written 4 books now. And then all of a sudden, like, people were asking me to come into schools, come into groups, like to do talks, do assemblies, and then do training and stuff like that. And then um, I left social work full time then, and it's just sort of grown and grown and grown. We've done some really cool, exciting stuff, like partnering up with diagnostic clinics. We've done a lot of recruitment work because one of the main things we have too is that 80% of autistic and ADHD people are unemployed. And that stat has been in place since 1999. So we've been plugging ourselves into the, I suppose, the corporate America, corporate EU, corporate UK and Ireland to try and get more autistic and ADHD people into meaningful careers that they love and that they enjoy. So we've been doing that, and then schools training. We've been kind of everywhere. We've,
You have
and
over 90 staff all over the world, is that right?
and trainers,
And
yeah.
trainers?
We have like a network of trainers and people that we can lean on, and subcontractors and stuff like that. We have loads of things going on. We have loads of people. We're kind of everywhere now. It's
good.
just gone out of hand, and we won awards, and we got funding and investment and stuff like that. It's just
Not
been,
out of hand. It's what's needed, and it's amazing. And the fact that it's affordable as well, like you said at the start, because you were very mindful of the people that can't afford the big
Yeah.
prices of private care. So that's amazing. So there is services out there. There's a website. We're going to link it in the show notes so people can go, and there's resources on there as well, and things that people can go to use to find out more. And you do skydiving, like what the hell? I know you wanted to talk about that as well. Like, I mean, I could think of nothing worse, but each to their own. But
neither can I, but that's what makes it fun.
I know, well, that shows you the difference in me and you. But amazing as well as you're able to do whatever you want.
I'm able to do whatever I want because there's no impediments or restrictions. It's like a lot of parents worry about their child lacks a sense of danger, right? But it's not about that. It's they have higher dopamine needs. Like, I have higher dopamine needs. Like, say anytime the bungee club are in Belfast, I'm the first to sign up. Like, I'm one of those people. I like jumping off stuff. I like a wee bit of danger, and I think I'm just somebody that if my life's not in danger at least 10, 20 times a year, then I don't know how I feel. It's just like, I have this energy where a lot of parents say my child doesn't have a sense of danger or whatever else, or they're a runner or whatever else. They have too much energy. So burn it off. And like the whole skydiving thing, that's how I get into it. And it's, a lot of people worry that, even in school, oh, my child spins round and round and rocks back and forth. But I do that now, and it's socially acceptable because I'm falling to my death, and the only thing to save my life is a rag in a bag.
Stop it.
I know,
Oh my God.
but that's what makes it fun. But here's the thing, though. I look at you and think, how can you not love that? How can you not just feel alive, feel like the wind and the hailstones in your face, and wonder if your parachute's going to open? Like, it's great.
Isn't that so interesting though? You would see me as being the one that's probably not
Aye.
as highly functioning right because I'm not doing what you're doing.
Where I look at you and think, oh dear, is she even
What a
living
boring
a fulfilled
job.
life?
What a boring life she has.
Like, how do you
How do I get rid of all the energy?
How do you feel alive, man?
Oh, I know. Well, look here, you obviously haven't been following me too long because I do run around a wee bit, like full of energy all the time. But look, each person has their own way, as you say, of getting that energy out. And you're doing this now through skydiving, which is amazing. People can follow Jude. We'll link him as well in the show notes. I am ending, and I don't want to end. I want to talk to you. I swear you'll come back definitely. I know it because
100%.
there's so many people we can help with this kind of conversation, and it's all. Everyone, would be listening. And I went through your social media posts, and there's people underneath that don't agree sometimes with some of the things that you say. And you always come back with very, what's the right word? Your advice is always very, like, this is a different situation I'm talking about, or you maybe ask them to get in touch with you privately or whatever. So each person will have an opinion, I am sure, when they listen. But you have talked us through all the ways you've lived your life and how you're now helping other people, which is what this is about, open conversation. I'm ending all the podcasts this series, Jude, with a question, because I live my life very much based on what other people maybe give me advice on things or inspiration. What's the best piece of advice that you've ever been given? Or can you narrow it down to one? Or is there one or two things that you kind of live by, or great advice that somebody said to you at one time that's helped you?
I'll repeat it, and I said it in the middle of
You've
this,
already
is
said it.
stop trying to find solutions for problems that may not even happen.
Love that.
Think of today. Think of right now. Don't think of next year. Don't think of the year after that, because guess what? Life will just pass you by and you'll look back and think, God, I spent all that time trying to find a solution to a problem that didn't even happen. And even worse, I spent money on it. So, I mean, live your life. Stop worrying. Don't panic. Everybody will be fine.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being a guest on the Dig podcast. I'm sorry your car didn't start and the day has not got off to a good start, but today is going to get even better now. We know that when you leave here. Thank you for joining us, and stay in touch, and hopefully we'll be able to see each other again maybe on the Dig podcast soon.
Yay, absolutely. Look forward to it.